Let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully the network will hold up for me. I've been having a few minor issues with it this morning. That's always exciting when 100% of your demo relies on the network. I'm happy to see everybody here. My name is Chris Patterson. I'm a program manager on what we call the Visual Studio Cloud Services team, which used to be called the Team Foundation Server team. They like to rename us a lot just to keep everybody confused. And call things that are not a IDE in the web the same name as the IDE. So that also confuses people. So what I'm here to talk to you today about is build automation. So how many people here, before we get started, use Team Build or some build CI server? Awesome. So you guys are well versed in the excitement thereof. So what I'm going to talk about today is all of the work we've done to make Team Build better in TFS 2015 as well as in Visual Studio Online, because they share the same code base. They are the same thing. And hopefully they will help solve some of your problems you run into. So of those of you that use Team Build, how many of you love workflow? Awesome. That's really good. That bodes well for me. Before we get started talking about exactly what we have built, I'm going to give you a very quick kind of intro demo. So here I am. I've got my Visual Studio Online account up and running here. And one of the things you'll see that's probably different in most of your accounts and mine is I've got this build.preview tab here. This is the new build experience that is, actually I want to go to this one. New build experience that's coming with, it's in the RC, so if you have TFS RC, you've installed that, or some of you may be in the early adopter program. However, you will all see this tab appear in your account sometime within the next 2 weeks as we roll out these features to the broad service. But to get started, I'm going to create a very quick new build definition. I'm going to do it in the web. So first thing is I don't have to go to Visual Studio to create build definitions. Secondly, I can do cool things like maybe add running a script without having to open the XAML and edit it, which is also kind of a nice feature. So we'll delete that. We'll talk more about that later. And then from here, I can click Save, pop up with an audience, say new demo, hit OK. And so I've now created a very quick build definition that knows how to build a Visual Studio solution and run Visual Studio test-based unit tests. And that's pretty much any unit test framework that works inside Visual Studio Test Runner. And about 10 seconds between when the build sort of gets assigned to a machine, the agent will pick up and start running, and we will see the output of our build in a nice, pretty log in the web. All right, so that's a very quick kind of intro into what it is. We'll go into all the more fun details here in a couple of minutes. Is main the right one? One? Two? Which one is the PowerPoint machine? I'll just click through them. Nope. Anybody? Five? Is 5 the PowerPoint machine? There we go. Fantastic. All right. So, as you saw, that's a pretty significant change from what you see today. And the first question that may go through some people's mind is, hey, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing that? Well, there's a lot of reasons why we chose to make some pretty drastic changes to Team Build. The first thing to note is if you have existing build definitions, you're using existing XAML templates, they all continue to work just fine. You have to make absolutely 0 changes to those to keep them working. The new build automation system is completely side-by-side with the existing one. So your existing controllers, whether they be 2010 controllers because you're still building on XP, or 2012, 2013, or even the 2015 XAML build controller, which is kind of how we're re-talking about that, continues to work just fine. However, you now have a new option for a build definition type. It's all edited in the web. It's much simpler. It's sort of a more sequential list of tasks, closer to what most of the other systems use. or how they look anyway. It's also got some really neat advantages that we'll talk about in a few minutes. So, why? I've talked to a lot of customers all the time, and for a number of years since I've owned TeamBuild, and this is like the first question I get. Hey, so I did my build, I've got this script I need to run, how do I do that? Now, let me put you through the 27 steps necessary to make that happen. It doesn't go over well. So we had to fix that problem. The next one is, hey, do you guys have an integration with insert tool or service here? Sauce Labs, XUnit, my favorite load testing tool, whatever the case may be. And the general case was no, because it was difficult for customers to both implement, as well as difficult for providers of those services to kind of figure out how do we create this integration into TeamBuild, and how do we actually deliver that to customers so they can sort of consume it in a reasonable way. So we wanted to fix that. This was the next big one. Can I build my iOS and Android apps with TFS? How many of you are doing mobile development? How many of you build iOS apps? Okay, so a smaller number, but generally speaking, the population is growing, and in order to do that, of course, you have to actually build those on a Mac. Well, I don't know, it might not be 100% true after what we saw last week at Build, but that was news to me. But for most native iOS development, you've got to build it on a Mac. So we had to solve that problem. So it means we needed a cross-platform solution, right? And Windows Workflow, not very cross-platform. What about my enterprise Java apps? How many people have Java development, do Java, right? It's sort of weird to say, well, you can kind of build Java, but you need to go create an MS build file first to call your Ant or Maven or whatever. And that's kind of foreign for people. And if you're a Java dev, you're like, well, now I got to go learn a little bit about MS Build and this weird workflow thing that I can't actually edit in my IDE, on and on. So we had to fix that problem. This was another fun one that I got regularly. So you upgrade the server, and you try to edit your build definition, and you get some weird error that's basically a deserialization error. Because when you take a giant object graph and you put it on a server, and then you try to deserialize that object graph on a machine that doesn't actually have those assemblies, it creates problems. So that was, and this honestly was probably the biggest difficulty with the XAML system, or at least the way we used it. So I wanted to solve that problem. So people could continue using whatever version of VS they needed to for a variety of reasons. There's all kinds of reasons not to go to the latest version of VS. Usually it's related to SSIS or BizTalk or something like that, because they don't seem to upgrade their tools very frequently. But we wanted you to be able to upgrade your TFS servers and take advantage of all of the new features there. You can use new build definitions, things like that, but you can still use the version of VS that you wanted to. So that's the big reason why all the editing is in the web. So that way we're not tied to any particular version. Not just of VS, but frankly any IDE. Visual Studio Code, anybody tried that yet? So pretty cool little editor. Obviously doesn't have build integration. But with the new system, you can use it just fine. So where do I find my build logs? Anybody struggle with this one? Build fails. You don't know why, and you're digging through, and you got this kind of weird tree of XML, but it doesn't actually show you why your build failed. So seriously, who's had this problem? Yeah, I have it all the time, and I've debugged a lot of customers' problems. It's very difficult, so we wanted to fix that and get rid of this weird log indirection thing and just, hey, here's the log. Here's the output. And then the last one is just kind of a joke. So opens the template for the first time and says, you're kidding, right? Anyway, so those are a lot of the conversations that I've had with customers over the last few years, and why we started this effort of completely revamping TeamBuild for the third time, hopefully the last time. Anyway, when I started this project, or when my team started this project, we went around and we looked, we talked to customers, and we wanted to put a bunch of things in place of some principles, like what do we really want to build? The first thing we decided was we don't want to create a new build automation domain-specific language, no new DSL. Right? XAML is a DSL. It's a DSL for doing lots of things. Windows Workflow happened to use XAML for its serialization format. But it is yet another language to learn. It's another thing that you have to learn beyond whether it's MS Build or Gradle or Maven or Ant or Shell Script or PowerShell or whatever it is you use to drive your build, we didn't want you to have to learn something else. So what we really wanted to do was create a system that was really, really good at just running those. So that was principle number one. Number two, we had to support non-Windows platforms natively, right? We could not continue to go forward, especially in today's world of mobile development or really any kind of development. And if you look at a lot of the new stuff that even Microsoft is producing and a lot of our partners, we had to have a solution that had an agent that could run a build on a Mac or on Linux without having to do some weird SSH configuration where you kind of ran the build on Windows but poked over to the Mac or Linux machine to do the actual compilation. We wanted to have a very intentional extensibility model where instead of having to kind of create an assembly that implemented an activity and then go figure out how to check it in and figure out how to incorporate it into your XAML, we wanted to say, hey, somebody, you as a customer or a third party, can create a zip file that has some information, some metadata information and some implementation in it, and then provide that to customers, and they can upload it to their server, and it's automatically deployed to all the agents, and it shows up in the UI so you can use it without a lot of extra work. So a very intentional extensibility mechanism. This will also, I don't know if you've gone to any of the sessions around Visual Studio Online extensibility that were here, or you watched them from last week. This also feeds into that whole sort of marketplace for extensions to both TFS and Visual Studio Online that is being built and coming. So there should be great opportunities there. And then the last one is that log thing. So don't hide it. I want to be able to see it. All right. So let's get away from slides and just start walking through some interesting demos. Okay, so we did file new build my solution, kind of. But what I want to do is go back and walk through some more details about how this actually works. All right, so I created a new build definition, and the first thing I did was I hit the plus sign here, and I brought up kind of this template gallery. Previous to this new team build, you kind of had one template, right? It sort of tried to do everything. Well, now we've got a bunch, and you can actually create your own. So you can pretty easily take a build definition, you can add the tasks you want to it, you can set up the variables, and you can save it as a template. And it will show up in this gallery for everybody in your project. So you can create your own fairly easily. But also we can create templates that are scenario specific to help you get going. Right? What? Awesome. Windows Update. Fantastic. Hopefully IT doesn't reboot me. It is 12 o'clock. They like to do that. 12 o'clock at least, yeah, in my office in North Carolina. So anyway, a bunch of templates. One, the Visual Studio build template, which is one I use, which is really for saying, hey, you want to build a Visual Studio project. It's got a MS Build project file or a solution. It's based on .NET. That works great. Xamarin Android, Xamarin iOS, Xcode. There's also some templates for deploying simple cloud services and websites and things like that. So the first thing is, how can we help you get started really easily? And as you saw, this template just laid out a few things for me. Each one of these has got some inputs I can set up. I get help, maybe. It tells me what's going on there. So all in all, it should be a pretty simple way for you guys to get started. The second thing here is the task gallery. As you can see listed here, there's 25 or so out-of-the-box tasks for doing a variety of different things. Do you want to run MS Build? Do you want to run, let's just go look at all of them. Ant, right? Do you want to do a deployment with Chef? Do you want to run CMake? Do you want to use CocoaPods with your iOS application? I just want to run a command line, right? Really simple stuff. So this is a list that is open and extensible by you. We'll have details on that kind of coming in the future. However, it's also, oh boy, that was not the right one to go to. Let's try again. So if you go to GitHub, And look here. It's actually all completely open sourced as well. So all of the plugins, all of the task plugins that we've written, that we are shipping in the box, are available under the Microsoft organization on GitHub. The main reason is we will take, over time, we actually will take contributions there, but we really want to push people to the marketplace kind of format. But what this does do is it does make it really easy if you want to implement. You're in your group, your enterprise, you need to implement your own custom task for some reason. You have a lot of examples, right? You can just go here and look in how it's done, copy and paste to get started. So it should be fairly easy. So that's the main reason that's there. And as you can see, there's a bunch here for doing a variety of different things. So that's tasks. Lots of them there. There will be more to come. And it should be pretty easy for you to build your project. Moving on over. I won't talk too much about options. It's not overly interesting. Repository is pretty much what it says. Source control configuration. One of the neat things we do have here is if you click on the GitHub type of repository, you can actually set up a CI build from GitHub into VSO if you want to. So this will set up the webhook with GitHub, and excuse me, every time a code is pushed, it will trigger a build inside VSO. So if for you guys have projects that exist in both places, you have an open source project you want to build or whatever, that's all there. So that's kind of nice. Variables. This is another kind of an interesting challenge that people had. So how many of so you want to do a deployment or you want to access some resource and you need a password in your builds. Anybody do that? Have run into that problem? Okay. So it used to be we didn't have a good solution for you. So now I can just put a variable in there, we'll call it my password, and I can click on the little lock here. And that will ellipses it out. It stores it encrypted on the server. And when you run, the build runs on the agent, we mask it in any output. So we watch all of the output from the agent, all of the output written to logs within reason of things we can control, because you can always find some way to get it out, right? I mean, there's nothing, we can't do 100%. But for the most part, it at least gives you that basic, hey, we've got a password here. It's not in plain text. It's not openly available to everybody. But you know, it does have to be decrypted to use it. So it's not 100% secure. But it is much better. And of course, I can add other variables if I want. Do another one here. Do that, give it a value. And I could even check it to say, hey, I want this to be available at queue time. So if I save this guy real quick, and then I hit queue build, you can see that my var now shows up there in the queue build dialog. So it's really easy to kind of create build definitions that somebody can queue it, and you can give them kind of some inputs that they could change on queue time if they want to. So it makes that really simple. We'll cancel out of that. All right, so that's a little bit about variables. Variables are just name value. They go down to the system. As you can see here, you simply reference them in this $paren variable name syntax. So if you use that syntax in any field, it will be replaced. So any of the input fields, if you can have a long string, you can put that thing right in the middle. We go through and replace it everywhere. So, and they're also all available as environment variables. So anything you create as a variable here will also be set as an environment variable when we launch a script or something. So it makes it pretty flexible for you guys to use. Triggers. All right, this is one of my favorites. I love this feature now. So how many people have multiple build definitions just because you want to have a CI and a scheduled build? You don't have to do that anymore. So I can actually, on this build definition, I can set up a CI build, and I can set up a scheduled build trigger on the same build definition. Further, I can actually add multiple schedules to the scheduled build. So let's say I've got a team in a North US and a team in India, and I want to have an early morning scheduled build in each of the appropriate time zones, right? So I could simply say that, hey, I want a build at 3 a.m., I don't know, where's it, Eastern Standard Time, and a build at 3 a.m., let's see, China Standard Time. Let's go with China, right? So I can add multiple schedules to the same build definition. Further, I can choose to include multiple different branches within those schedules, right? So I have a lot of flexibility in the way I set up my build definition now. I no longer have to try to clone or copy or maintain multiple definitions to sort of build the sum total of the different things I build in my project. So like I could say, I want to do localize ENUS. So this is going to kick off 2 builds at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, one for the master branch and one for my loc branch, right? I could even choose to exclude certain builds. So if I wanted to do something like refs, heads, feature, oops, should hit star, right? So what this is going to do is any branch matching refs, heads, feature that starts with that is going to get kicked off. So it could be end builds, right? So there's lots of different ways that I can set up and control this particular feature. I can also do this with CI builds. I can include multiple branches. I can include, exclude branches. For TFVC, I can do this with paths. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that here in a moment. And I also have this ability to batch changes. So what the CI trigger currently is going to do, let's pick a different branch. We'll pick up the localize. So what this CI trigger says is every time somebody pushes to either master or localized, I'm going to kick off a build. However, I will only ever run one build at a time, right? So what it's going to do is somebody pushes, it starts a build. If that build is still running and 5 more people push, we're going to wait to start the next build until that one finishes. So this lets me have kind of a rolling build for my branch. If I want to have a true CI where every single commit gets built independently, I just uncheck that and it will build as many builds at any given time as I have agents to process those. All right, so that's a little bit about triggers. Let's see, the general tab. Okay, so this one's kind of interesting. Let me uncheck these for now. So on here we've got the very basic stuff, which queue you want to go to. We'll talk about that in a minute. Build number format, job authorization. So one of the other things that we wanted to fix with this new system is currently in Team Build, when you connect a controller up to your collection, and that the account that process is running of gets added as a fairly highly privileged account within your collection. Now what that means is I, as a malicious person, can check in code and like spin up a TFS connection and go party on the server in a unit test or something like that. Now in most cases, at least most cases I've worked with, people generally trust their developers, but it is an issue. So we wanted to try to make it a little bit better. Basically to say that it's at least very difficult for somebody to create a script or create a unit test that goes and connects back to the server and does work. So what we do is we give you these 2 scopes of authorization. And what this says is, in the project collection, when it says that we have an identity in the system that gives access, which is basically the same level of access that a controller would have today by default, right? It has access to all the projects in the collection. However, the big difference is, even though the identity the build is running as has access to all of the projects in the collection, it's not, the process doesn't have access. So this is a token-based identity that we generate on the fly that we ship down to the agent. So even if I have this build definition running at the project collection scope, I can't easily, as a developer, get those credentials from a script that I have checked into source control, from an MS build task, from a unit test, right? So there's still a pretty big separation between what the system can do, i.e. tasks that have been added to the build definition, and what code that is running, being built or being run as part of the build can do. Does that make sense to everybody? That's a little bit complicated, but we're working on documenting so it's really clear. I could also further select the project scope, and of course that would mean that this build would only have access to source and work items and things like that in the team project that this build definition is in. Okay? So that's improving that security for your build. Now down here, there's this demands section. So this feeds into another big change that we made to help out our customers. So how many of you have the problem of you got a bunch of collections and now you have to have a machine per collection to do builds? Is that an issue for some of you? All right, not as many as I thought, but a lot of other people do. So we fixed that problem. Now you create pools of agents. So your administrator can create pools of agents at the server level, which is kind of what I'm looking at here. So I'm up here at the root level of the server. I'm on the Agent Pools tab. And I actually have two pools listed here. I have my hosted pool, and I've got the kind of default pool, which I happen to have one Mac agent in at the moment. But these pools are shareable across collections within the system, but they're not automatically shared with all collections. So if I go down one level, let's go down here, and look at the collection administration page, I see this build tab here. Now I'm in my default collection, and now I see that I actually have given access to both, but I see the queues within this collection that point at the pools up on the server. So I can, as a build administrator, I can say, hey, we've got a pool of resources that we want to share with all collections. I could say that I've got a pool of resources I want to share with these 5 collections, and I've got a pool of resources I want to share with these 5 collections. I can even have 2 agents on the same machine in 2 different pools. So you have a lot of flexibility in the way you configure your build resources now. The other thing you can do is you can better delegate the administration of your pools. So if I go back here to this default pool, I see this Agent Pool Administrators group. Now what this means is anybody who's a member of this group can add agents to this pool, but only this pool. So right now, you have to be pretty highly privileged within the collection and unfortunately that gives you a lot of other privileges you might not want to have just to manage build resources, right? You've got to have like collection level permissions, and it's kind of complicated, and those groups provide you with a bunch of broad permissions. Here we've segregated them a lot and made it much easier for the build administrators in your org to say, hey, Team A, here's your pool. You're an administrator of that pool. You can add your resources to that pool. You can manage it. You can do whatever you want to, but you can't touch anybody else's. Okay? So that will help break some of those administration headaches. The other thing that this list does, if I go to try to queue to the default pool, actually, we just do it this way. Yeah, that's fine. Save it. So if I hit queue build here to the default pool, it's going to come back with a message that says, hey, you can't, well, this isn't exactly the one I wanted. Anyway, you can't queue here for a variety of reasons. So the example of MS Build, Visual Studio, etc. is not available within that pool. That's because my default pool only has the agent from the Mac here in it. And clearly the Mac does not have Visual Studio or MS Build installed on it currently. At some point, maybe it will, who knows. So this gives me the ability to basically say, I've got heterogeneous pools. So I've got pools with Windows machines and Mac machines and Linux machines. And because of the way the definition is configured, because of the way that the tools that a given definition wants to use, I can't accidentally queue a build to a machine that can't run it. Okay, so that gives you some amount of protection. And it's further, really more digs into the management of your build infrastructure. All right, retention policies. We got fairly flexible retention policies here. We actually have switched with this system from the count-based. Does anybody have trouble with the count-based retention where it like keeps, really, it's not an issue for some of you? Some people yes, some people no. So right now it's a date-based retention unless of course you marked as retain indefinitely. So you kind of have the ability to set up, you can actually set multiple retention policies on any given build definition. You can have different retention policies for different branches. So it gives you a fair bit of flexibility there. And then finally, history. Okay, so this is the other fun one. Auditing of changes to build definitions. Is that an issue for anybody? Yeah. Yeah, so we fixed that too. So I can now pull up and look. I can see who changed it. I can see exactly what they changed. I can get a diff, right? So now we have the ability to audit. You changes your build definition. So if somebody changes it and something breaks, and they say, I don't know, you can go and fix that. All right, so that's the kind of walkthrough of a lot of the high-level features that are available in the new build definition experience. Are there any comments, questions right now? Yes?
So do you have a rollback feature?
We will. It's not implemented right yet, but yes, it's coming. Yes? I'm sorry, can you speak up? I couldn't hear that. Yeah, the question was, is all of the functionality I'm showing in VS Online coming on-prem? Yes. So I happen to be showing against a VS Online deployment. It's just because it's easier to set things up for me that way. But yeah, it's all coming to on-prem. All of the exact same functionality exists on-prem. So nothing I've shown you today is any different than what you will see at RTM for the Team Foundation Server 2015. Yes?
Are there build steps to deploy the NuGet?
There will be. There are not currently, but we're working on them. The question was build steps to deploy to NuGet. I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to go on, and we'll have some more time for questions at the end. Yes? Yes? So the question was shared pools across collections. No, you cannot use the same agent across multiple servers, right? Because the agent connects to a server. However, the agents are Xcopy deployed. So you could use the same physical machine with two agents on it connected to different TFS servers, right? So it wouldn't be the same agent process, but you could share that same build machine among two different servers if you wanted to. So it kind of gives you the same effect from the standpoint of being able to share that hardware. All right, so let's go on to some other demos. Continuous delivery, continuous deployment. So I've got a definition here that I set up to deploy a couple of websites. And all I did was I picked my Azure website deployment template here and made a couple of minor modifications. So in this case, these tasks are set up to deploy to Azure websites. We'll be there. I'm working on one for MS Deploy just to kind of do local website deployment. If you want to do MS Deploy to your local IIS website as well, but it's pretty easy to set up. But the nice thing here is, one of the common questions we've gotten is, all right, so great, I've got a build definition that deploys to a website, but I have two websites that I need to deploy. Or better yet, I want to pick the website that I want to deploy. I don't want you just to pick the first one alphabetically. There's a lot of weird problems there. So we solved that problem with the new system. So what you can see I've done here is I've got a task that just builds. I've got a task that run tests. And then I have two of the Visual Studio build tasks that just target the different website projects within my solution. And all I do, let me zoom this in here, might make it a little better. Let's go to 150. So if I scroll over to the right here, all I do is I tell it, hey, when you run, go package up at this particular location. So I set the package location property on my website project to be the build staging directory, which is one of those variables. There's some documentation out on MSDN that shows the kind of built-in variables we have, which gives you locations like, hey, where's the repo on disk? Where's the kind of drop location on disk? Where's the local drop location? Things like that. So build staging directory is one of those. Contoso Web. So I have it go there. And then I have a second one that sets my package location to Contoso API. So just two different folders, and then each one of those creates that web deploy zip in there. Right? With me? Well, then I just dropped on two different Azure website deployment tasks and said, hey, first one, go pick up your package from this directory. Second one, go pick it up from the other location. And when this build definition runs, it deploys two websites, which is kind of nice. Now, what this also means is, the way this sets up is, the underlying technology that's deploying these is really just the Azure PowerShell. So has anybody played around with the Azure PowerShell commandlets for automation? They're really powerful, they're really useful. And I actually think it's probably, from Windows at least, the best way to automate your deployments if you're going to Azure. It's really the best way to automate deployments to any machine, local or not, but in this case we're talking about Azure. Any rate, so the underlying technology is an Azure PowerShell script, and if we went and looked at our GitHub repository here, Azure Web, right, we can see, hey, look, there's a PowerShell script in there. And this just has the right, calling the right commandlets to publish this web app. The nice thing is this is simply running PowerShell in this Azure subscription. So right, when you set up the Azure PowerShell, you go, you add Azure account, you enter your information, and it sets up a subscription, then you select that subscription, you run your PowerShell scripts, and everything's nice and authenticated for you, right? So what we've done is built into the new system gives you that experience. So I simply went in here, hopefully. Come on. All right, we'll go back to that in a second. So take my word for it. I simply added my Azure subscription, there it goes, into this system. So here's my Azure subscription. And this one happens to be a certificate-based one. I could actually add a new service connection here to Azure, and I could actually use credentials if I wanted to. So I could use the certificate, or if I'm using the new Azure Resource Manager stuff you've heard so much about, I could go create a user in my Azure Active Directory that you have as part of your Azure subscription that I use to deploy, and I could give that user contributor rights within my subscription. Then I can use that authentication context instead of the certificate one, which means I could use Azure RM instead of the raw RDFE APIs. Now, the nice thing about that is, let's say that you have a slightly more complicated app than a simple website, right? And you put some effort into automating that deployment with PowerShell. I can add a build step here, which is the Azure PowerShell task. And what that does is it gives me that same experience to go select which Azure subscription that I want to deploy to in this case. But I can just simply pick a PowerShell script that is checked into source control that does more complicated things than the one that we packaged up for you. So it gives you a lot more flexibility when setting up your continuous delivery, continuous deployment operations to Azure or on-prem. I mean, in the end, on-prem, same kind of thing. You've got a script that does your deployment, that talks out to servers. It all will work. The other nice thing here is if you've gone to, did you guys go to the DevOps session that Donovan did, talking about RM? So I don't know if you noticed, but it's the exact same list of tasks. It looks exactly the same. So the new RM features and the build features are built on the exact same engine, which means they have the same agents and the same infrastructure and the same extensibility, which means you can go all the way from very simple, hey, I've got a build to deploy my application, build, run, test, deploy my application, to, hey, I want to build and run some unit tests, but then I want to deploy my application to multiple environments, do more validation with manual testing and have approvals and actually have that full release process and tracking. But you don't have to learn two completely different things. Remember that whole idea of not learning a new DSL? It sort of goes across the board. Yes? The question was, how does labs fall into this? And I don't have an answer for you right now. So it is, labs basically are just a target of resources to deploy to. How those resources kind of come to be is, I don't really have a great answer for you right now. All right, okay. So that is my deployment. Again, I could go and set up, if I queue it, we can go look at the build here. If I go look at the builds, you know, we see that I ran, my deployment ran, some test results got run for it. Again, if I want to go back and I want to just look at the log, it's really simple to pull up the log and I can see everything that happened. If I want to download the logs and see what was going on, it's all there. And then, well, this guy's still loading. Those apps were deployed to Azure. I'm not going to run it right now because it takes like 5 minutes, and you don't want to sit here and watch a build run for 5 minutes. It's not terribly interesting. Okay, so that's some of the things we've done to make continuous delivery better. All right, now, switch over here. 8. Okay, so iOS As I mentioned, we have an agent that runs on a Mac, and I happen to just be running this agent right here in my timeout. That's interesting. Let's restart that guy. So in this case, I'm going to run the agent interactively just because I want to. You can also run it as a launch daemon or a launch agent, depending on what you want to do. All right, good. Sorry, I was having some network issues up here, so it looks like I lost my connection. At any rate, so I have Mac here. I'm using Chrome. I can go over to the build preview tab, and I've got my to-do iOS application. And in this case, it's a really, really simple one. It just runs Xcode build a couple of times. Well, it runs Xcode build and Xcode test for my iOS app. And I get the same sort of experience of selecting my project file to build. In this case, it's the Xcode workspace I want to build. There's a couple of little things I need to do. I had to pick the to-do iOS scheme. This is a specific thing for the way Xcode projects work. You've got to create a shared scheme in your Xcode project in order for it to work with CI generally. So I created one of those. I have my action, and then I'm passing some variables in there. Let's go ahead and queue this build, and we can watch it run. So we'll see the agent pick up here in a second, and there we go. So now I've got my iOS app running, and because in this case I'm running it interactively, I could also run it as a launch agent. And what that lets me do is I get to run unit tests. So we should see here in just a second, did it come up? There, the simulator pop up. So the simulator is running. If we get here and run test, will it actually show us? Sometimes it hangs. There it goes. So there it launched and ran my test, and there we go. So I can now have my native iOS development. It will run using the simulator. You can actually run targeting devices. If you have devices hooked up to your Mac, your tests will run. Test results will come back and get published as other test results do inside TFS and Visual Studio Online. So you get that full, nice integration. So not a whole lot else to say there other than it's there. It works. It's really nice. The other sort of thing we've done here is made this agent open source. So if you go kind of that same place here, the cross-platform build agent is actually written in Node.js. So it's all JavaScript. So it'll run pretty much anywhere Node will run. So while most of our testing has focused around Linux and iOS and Mac, you could, in theory, run this on any platform where Node runs. In fact, one of my buddies set it up on his Raspberry Pi, which I thought was really interesting because I'm not sure Raspberry Pi is such a great build machine, but it worked. We also had it running in Docker, which is kind of cool. So you can spin up Docker containers of the Node agent and keep on going. So that's really nice for managing those agents. But anyway, it's here. It's open source. So that's very cool. And I think that's pretty much it for iOS or for Mac. All right. Next thing here. So let's switch back to 7. All right. Okay, so one of the other, I mentioned that whole partner extensibility thing, like making sure we have good integration with partners. Well, as sort of one of the first examples of that, we've done some work with Xamarin to make it really easy to build your Xamarin apps with this new system. In fact, on our hosted build service, we've installed all of the Xamarin tools there. So you now can build and potentially test your Xamarin apps using either a local build agent if you set up the tools or the hosted build service. And that's kind of what I have configured here. So this one definitely takes a little while to run, so I'm not going to run it. But right here you'll see built in, we've got this kind of Xamarin license management. So this is how you activate your license on the hosted build server. You just put some information in there. So you can see I'm using the password fields. It runs your build, stores NuGet packages, runs some tests, and then eventually, in this case, actually goes up to the Xamarin Test Cloud. So this device testing thing, which is really important, Xamarin actually has a pretty nice solution. And if I go to test cloud.xamarin.com. It's going to pull up my Test Cloud account. And you can see I've got this Validate credit card app, which is what I just built. And in here, I can see all of my tests. In fact, let's just go ahead and run this so we can see this kind of more live as we walk through that. So that'll start. That'll take a few minutes to run. But while we're doing that, we'll go ahead and take a look at the Test Cloud. So here, I've got all of the test runs that I ran. Actually ran these last week. And I can go in and start looking at details. So I can pull up here. I can see the tests that passed or failed. I can go in here and I can look at, hey, there's a failure. I can see the details. And then finally, with this integration, I can actually go here and say, hey, you know what? I've got a bug. And so I'm going to create a bug directly in Visual Studio Online. So there's a direct integration here for this failure. And it's going to go, call out, create a bug. Click on that. It'll take me over to an account. And I can bring up and I can see. Let's go. Good. Product backlog here. Hello. The right one? Oh, hold on a second. Let's just do a new query. There we go. So we can see that the one I just ran, and it populated information. I can click and go back and see that test result in the Xamarin Test Cloud. So if we go back and look here on my definition, see it's running. All right, so it's actually building now. Over time, it will go through, it'll build, it'll run my local unit test, and then it will take the resulting, in this case, it's a Xamarin Android app, the resulting APKs, ship it up to the cloud using the device or list of devices that I've specified, and run those, give me all of that information, and populate those test results back into my Visual Studio Online account. So really that tight integration with a partner, if you're using Xamarin for any of your development, we can, at least with the hosted build service, we can build Xamarin Windows apps and, of course, Xamarin Android apps, because they can both be built on Windows. We don't currently have Macs available in the hosted build service. We're evaluating that. But you can, of course, set up your own Mac machine if you like and have that participate as part of that same process. So I think that's pretty neat. All right. Okay, so that's kind of the last sort of major demo. Any questions before I kind of close out? So you've asked one, I'll let him back here and then we'll come back, okay? Yes, go ahead. So the question was, will this integrate with things like Maven for artifact repositories? Sure. So certainly Maven you can both restore and publish out to different artifact repositories, and that will all work there. The only really good integration is NuGet at the moment, but other things will come online as we start building out that list of tasks. So here, yes. That is your question? Back, yes? Yeah. Uh-huh. So the question was for ASP.NET websites, we want to kick off coded UI tests. Do we still need lab management? What you really need is you need an agent running in an interactive mode, unless you're going to use something like Phantom.js. But the coded UI tests that we have to run on the desktop because of the way they drive the thing. By default, obviously, lab management sets up that way. But they're working on a test service that should come, and that will hopefully improve that scenario. There also, hopefully, will be integrations with things like Sauce Labs to make that even better. Let's go to 5 here. All right. So, kind of wrapping up here with some of the nitty-gritty details. Is it really only 12:30? Golly, that went fast. Maybe we'll dig into some more stuff if you have interesting questions. Actually, no, I want to talk about TFVC before we do that. Let's go ahead and look at TFVC. All right, so my thing is running. Let me click over to another project here and talk about how this works with TFVC. So I created a simple demo build definition here that's set up on a Team Foundation version control account, because I'm sure a lot of you are using those. There are a few minor differences in the way the build system works with Team Foundation version control as compared to Git, just because they're different version control systems. Obviously here, you've got workspace mappings. You can go through and set up your workspace mappings. There is one significant missing feature right now that is going to come in update 1 that is not going to make RTM, which is you don't have the ability to set the local path. So right now, you basically map the server path, and then we pick the most common server route, and we just push things down on disk that way. So you can't sort of remap the server path to a different path locally, unfortunately. I know that is going to cause some issues for certain customers, and I apologize for that, but it just didn't make it. But I can set that up there. The other difference here is with triggers. So with CI and scheduled triggers, instead of having branches, obviously we have paths that you can map. One of the nice things about the way the CI triggers work now, it gives us a feature that people have been asking for a lot, which is, okay, I have my workspace map. This is the code I want to build. But there's some paths in there that are shared, like tools and things like that, among a whole bunch of definitions. And I really don't want to build every time those change. Does anybody have that situation where they've kind of got workspace mappings that include a path? Well, so now you don't have that problem. So what I can do is I can say, I want it, from the CI side, I can exclude certain paths. So I can basically say, you know what, when somebody, even though build process templates is actually mapped in this workspace, I want to exclude monitoring that path from this CI trigger. So that way you can say, hey, I want to monitor some set of paths, I want to exclude monitoring others, and that way you can have a much more flexible definition for your CI trigger in this case. Did I hear yay? Clap, anybody? Golf clap? So that's kind of a really nice feature that's there. Scheduled works the same way generally as it does for Git. You just, because because branches are not repository wide, you can get a bunch of schedules for this one definition, but it is for the workspace that's mapped, right? We can't really pivot across branches in that way. We've thought about trying to come up with some ways to make that work, but we can never come up with something that we thought was satisfactory. Yes, question. Yes, the question was improvements on Git submodule support. Yes, there is. I'll go back and look at that in a second, but yeah, it's much better, meaning it actually exists now. So I guess that's better. Yes, question.
With the scheduled build, do you ever run a different set of tests for a different one or stamp a different assembly?
Not yet, but that is a high on the backlog. So the question was, can I do some modification of either, say, variable values or sets of tasks based on the trigger type, is really probably the question. And that's not going to be there in RTM, but it is high on the backlog. The thing we want to be very careful about is I don't want to get into a very complex if-then-else sort of structure in the build definition. So we've been thinking about ways we can design this in so it's kind of a very simple, very basic condition for things like trigger, because now that you have multiple triggers on the build definition, it's at least logical to say, hey, nightly I want to at least run a larger set of tests, right? Or I do want to stamp the version on the assemblies in the nightly build, but I really don't care to on the CI build, as an example, because I don't, those types of things. So it is something we're definitely working on. It's just not quite there right now. Okie dokie. I think there's anything else interesting that's different for TFVC. At the moment, no. So that's basically the two major differences. Are really around the triggers and how they work for TFVC. We did have that question about, hey, my build failed because my test failed. That's really cool. If I go back and look at the Xamarin Test Cloud, I should have a new run that just came up. There's my May 6th run, right? So it's real. It actually works. Same test failure, though. So that's pretty nice. If I go back and look at this Git-based build definition in this case, and I look at the repository, there's an option here to check out submodules. So if you just simply check that, we will do the submodule init and checkout for you. The thing we don't have, which I've heard some requests for, is those submodules either have to come from the same project that this particular repository is in Visual Studio Online, or need to come from something that's anonymously accessible. We don't have the ability to do submodules with authenticated repositories outside of VSO right now. But hopefully that'll come as we just continue to improve on the update cadence. All right, so that's a little bit about, so that's TFVC. It works great with TFVC, works great with Git. Test integration is there, kind of as you would expect. You know, that's fine, we'll exit that. If I go look at, the summary for this guy, I see the test results come up. I can go, if I want more details, I click on those. It brings me over to the new Run Explorer view that's there. So we'll bring that up. And I can see some sort of nice charts and details and get a lot richer experience for analyzing my test runs in the browser. So I no longer have to bring them down to Visual Studio to go see the details of a test result failure, which is kind of nice. I can do that here in the browser. I can just go see the test results. All right. So since we have time, I'm going to do one more demo for you. Okay, so how many of you, where's my simple build? All right, is this one building the console app? Nope. Let's do this Ignite demo one. Okay, how many of you guys are using pull requests or are familiar with pull requests? Okay, so we have some pretty cool new features coming for pull requests. So what I'm going to go here is I'm going to pull up a branch, refactor testability, and let's go ahead and expand in here. And I've got some, maybe some code. Actually, let's pull it up. Which one am I looking at? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and edit this guy. So I can edit this file on the web. Save that. And now I've got a commit that's run. If I go over to pull requests, I can go create a new one. And I've got my changes here relative to master, and I can create a pull request. And you can see that one of the things and I've got merge conflicts, so that's the first problem. The second thing you can see there is it's awaiting a build, right? So with the new build system combined with pull requests and branch policies, with Git now, it'll come to TFVC a little bit later, I can create gates, right, from moving code from one branch to the other. So I can basically say, in order to get into master, you've got to have a code review, you have to merge clean, and you've got to pass this build that has some subset of unit tests, right? And so that build will get kicked off here, hopefully, at some point. Come on. Oh, you know what? I messed that up because I edited that build definition to point it at the pool that it can't run it. That was dumb. Let me go fix that. Night demo. Actually, queued. Anyway, we'll go back and let's go back and look at one that's there. So at any rate, so if I go look at pull requests, we can have a build on it. Let me go look at one that we did last week, working with one of my buddies. So we can say, here we see one that, hey, merge is complete, the build completed and approved. If I want to go see sort of more details, I can click on that. That will navigate me over to look at the build log and the output. In this case, there was no test results. But I can use branch policies with pull requests that gives me code review, obviously merge, and build as part of my gating of entry for code between branches and Git repositories. Over time, you'll see this come to things like entire repository forks, things like that, eventually shelve sets with TFVC, right? So it's a pretty nice system. But all this is predicated on a lot of the work we did in the new build system to make it more flexible and to enable these kinds of integrations. All right, so that's pull requests. Okay, So to kind of wrap things up, no new build DSL. There's lots of them to go around. Please use yours. Don't make me learn yours to run mine, or the vice versa. Native cross-platform. So we have a Node.js XPlat agent, runs basically anywhere Node.js will run, primarily targeted at Mac and Linux scenarios right now. At least that's where we're testing. But it's open source, and if you'd like to pull it down or pull down the package and install it elsewhere and provide us feedback with, hey, it doesn't work on platform X, we'd love to hear it so we can fix those problems and continue to improve it. Extensibility. So you notice we had a lot of tasks for easily running scripts as part of your build. I think that if you're customizing your build, I would focus on scripts first and then build tasks kind of as you have specific scenarios to enable. But that is there. They're all open source, so you can go see them and view them and learn. The implementation is PowerShell on Windows and JavaScript for the Node agent. We're working on making that JavaScript on either place, but that's just kind of where we are right now. They're a simple zip file. You basically create them, you upload them to the server. They're automatically delivered to all the agents and available in the gallery in the build definition. Logs are there. They're the exact same output that you would see if you ran something from the command line. So they should be more familiar. They're easy to download, so you can use tools to grep through them and find stuff and debug problems. So I think that's great. The architecture, it's completely side-by-side with XAML builds, meaning that when you upgrade your Team Foundation server on-prem to 2015, if you have any 2010 controllers, they will continue to work, as well as going forward, as well as we did ship a new controller for Dev 14 or VS 2015. So that's all there. That continues to work. And I think that's the most important thing for everybody who has invested in that infrastructure, and will continue to work for a long time. However, we did make a lot of changes, so there's no more physical controller, which gives you a lot of things. The first one being we can easily share agents across many servers. The second one, probably less obvious one, is the controller, which is now the application tier, is now highly available, meaning that losing a controller does not kill all of the builds, right, on that controller. I'm sure somebody has run into that problem. I see a head nodding here. So if you have multiple ATs, right, you've got a Team Foundation server set up and you've got a load balanced application tiers, everything works and is highly available. Obviously, the single agent is not. If you lose the agent, you're going to lose the build that's running on that agent. Agent pools are defined and managed at the deployment level, the server level. And the agents are Xcopy deployed from the server. I didn't show this, but I don't know if you noticed when I was on the Agent Pool Administration tab, there's this kind of download agent button there. So basically, if you want to install an agent on another machine, you go to that machine. You can bring up the web browser and download the agent package from the server and install it there. It's just a simple configuration via script to install it. And once that agent's installed, it will auto-update itself as the server updates. So you install RTM, you get a hotfix or a patch or update 1. There's a new agent. It will automatically deploy out to any machines where the agent is already running. It'll update itself. So that should help with the management of your build farm. Just kind of a picture of how this works. This deck is available, so you can look at that later. Security. A couple of things here that I want to mention. So above and beyond the scope of the user that the build runs as, we also switched the architecture, so instead of using app domains for each agent, every build runs in its own process. So what happens is the build starts and we spin up what we call the worker, which actually does the running of the build. And then when that build is done on that agent, that worker dies. The nice advantage here is you don't get weird process space corruption that you can sometimes get with builds, because builds are very messy, right? They do all kinds of crazy things. They set variables and they open file handles all over the place, and you kind of get some weirdness. And we ran into that a few times with the fact that in Team Build previously, you had the build service host, and even if I had 4 agents on that box, there were really just 4 app domains inside the build service host process. Now, one agent, one agent process equals one agent, and then each build gets its own fresh worker process to actually run that build. I know that's very deep, but it's important to people who deal with this stuff. Pool administration can be delegated nicely, and of course the access token scope for each build. So anyway, if you want to take it for a spin, you can download the Team Foundation Server 2015 release candidate. Also, new hosted build pools, and this new build preview tab will show up in your VS Visual Studio Online accounts in about 10 days. So there we go. That's all.